Hello there all my lovely jewelry makers. In today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these unisex wire kumihimo bracelets. So they have this interesting pattern on them which would also be great for oxidizing. So if you want to learn how to make it, then keep watching. So first of all we need our wire. Now I have two different gauges here. So my copper wire is a 0.8 mil and this is going to be the wire we're making the braid with. And then my silver coated copper wire is a 0.6 mil and we're going to use this to help make the pattern on the braid afterwards. And that's also why I'm using two different colors here, just to help it kind of contrast and stand out from each other. So aside from the wire, we of course need our other materials as well. So first of all I have my square kumihimo disc here to make the braid with. And I'm also using electrical tape, and this is to help hold the wires together. I then have my findings. So first of all I have my ribbon ends here. They're going to go on the ends of the braid and finish them off nicely. And along with them I'm going to be using the E6000 glue. And then for the clasp I'm using a lobster claw clasp, an extender chain, and of course some jump rings, but you can use whatever you prefer. So make sure you check out the description box below the video. I'm going to have the material list and links you might find useful, but otherwise let's get all the materials together and let's get started. So then the lengths of wires that we're going to need is first of all 12 lengths here of our 0.8 mil of about 40 centimeters each, and these wires are going to be used to make the braid. I then took all my 0.8 lengths of wire here, made sure the ends were even, and then I laid them flat next to each other and I put some tape around one end to hold them together, and then the very ends of the wires are bent back over the tape there just to stop them from pulling through the tape as we're going to start making the braid. So we now need to attach these wires here onto our disc. So we grab the disc here and then I take the end with the tape and put it down through the hole in the center. Now it's going to be coming out on the back there, and I'm just going to grab onto it with my fingers on that back side of the disc. And then we need to distribute all these lengths of wires into the slots. So what we need, because we have 12 lengths, I'm going to end up with 6 lengths in the middle 6 slots on the top, and then the remaining 6 lengths in the middle 6 slots on the bottom. So I'm just going to start from one side here, just pick the first one, and I'm just going to bring that to the top. Now obviously make sure we have the 2 middle slots, so we just need to count where we need to put that first one, with there being 6 on the top side. So place that into a slot, then grab the next length, because you want to kind of take the next wire available. There's no point in taking a length from here then taking a length from the opposite side. If I just separate that out, for instance taking this length here and then crossing it over to the other side, might as well take kind of from where the wires are naturally sitting next to each other. Now this one I'm going to then bring down into the opposite slot on the bottom, like that. And then the next one I'm just going to bring to the top, so we're kind of just alternating here. And we're working our way in towards the middle. Next one to the bottom. And then next one to the top. You can see I now have 3 on the top there, so we're kind of halfway on the top side, and then 3 on the bottom. So if you kind of imagine that this is the center of the disc, obviously it is the center, but that has then got 2 sides. We've just filled into the slots on the left side. Then now wanna just find the next wire here, separate that out. I think it's this one. And this one I'm then also just going to bring to the bottom. So basically do it in reverse. And the next one goes to the top. And we just continue alternating until we've placed all the wires here. We have the last 2. The last one on the bottom and the last one on the top. And as you can see, we now have all the wires coming out from the middle, and we have 6 in the 6 middle slots on the top, and the other 6 in the 6 middle slots on the bottom. And this is basically the setup of the disc. And this is going to be a starting point in every round. So now to get started actually making the braid, I'm just going to show you the technique. So this is going to be the cross kumihimo braid structure. So I'm going to start with the middle 2 wires on the top side of the disc. So out of those 2 middle ones, I'm first of all going to release the right one of them. This is just how I naturally start my rounds. So I'm going to make sure to do this every time. Keep starting with the same one every time you start a new round. So I've just released the wire, and I just then like to smooth it out between my fingers before I then take this right of the 2 middle ones and bring it towards the left side and put it into that slot on the left side. Now I take the left one of the 2 middle ones, just release it, because if you noticed when I released the wire from the slot, it has a slight bend to it. So just kind of get rid of that by running it through your fingers before you then bring it to the opposite side. So this one is going towards the right, and I also like to use my fingers to kind of push down here in the middle and then place it into the slot on the right side. So now we need to move all the wires on the bottom and the top of the disc, and because we have 2 free slots on the top, we need to start with the wires from the bottom and move them into those slots. So again, we have kind of a line down through the center of the disc, if you imagine that. So we have a left side of the disc and we have a right side of the disc, and just work on one side at a time. So I'm starting with my left, so I'm just going to take the very inner one, which is the left one of the 2 middle wires here on the bottom. Smooth out the wire first, and when you release it, and then as you bring it up towards the top, I like to put my thumb under it here and just kind of tug at it a little bit, while I'm then with my thumb kind of pushing against in the middle, and then bringing it up towards the top, placing it into the empty slot straight opposite. So that's the left one out of the 2 empty slots there. Then we move 1 slot out, release it, smooth it out, and here I use my index finger to kind of push and maneuver the wire. So push against and on top of the other wires here that it's crossing over the top of. As you bring it down into the empty slot on the bottom, free the next one out, smooth it out, bring it up, and we're just constantly moving 1 wire out at a time, swapping from top to bottom, bottom to top. Until we've used all of them, like that. So that was the left side. Basically, I'm now swapping hands, and we just need to repeat the same on the right side here. So that means I'm starting with the inner one on the bottom side here, which is the right one of the 2 middle ones. Again, my thumb goes underneath and I help push against the wire, and that helps make the braid tighter as well. Obviously right now we don't have a whole lot of braid going on, this is the first round, but as we keep going, the next one out, push down in the middle with the index finger and down into the empty slot on the bottom, and just keep repeating with 1 wire at a time basically, until we use all of them and they've all basically swapped to the opposite side of where they were. So now I'm left with 6 on the top and only 4 on the bottom, which means we obviously have the 2 on the sides. They need to be brought back into the braid, and because there's 4 on the bottom, they need to be brought back to the bottom side of the disc. So just start one side at a time, doesn't matter which one. Smooth out the wire, and then as I'm bringing this wire down, I like to push against, just do a little tug of the wire, and then push against the braid here on the side. That also helps tighten it up. And down into the empty slot on the bottom on the right side here. Now the left one, same thing. Smooth it out and tug at it a little bit as we're bringing it down, and then just push against the braid down the side and place it into the outer empty slot next to the other wires on the bottom. So now we have the original setup of 6 wires in the 6 middle slots on the top and 6 wires in the 6 middle slots on the bottom. And this is then 1 full round. So now you want to start the next round. just do the exact same thing. Out of the top 2 middle ones, I start with my right one. I want to make sure I stay consistent and keep doing that. As I release it, smooth it out, bring the right one towards the left, and bring the left one of the 2 middle ones there towards the right. And that's why the braid structure has that name as well, because we'll make sure that these 2 wires, the 2 middle ones on the top side, they cross in the middle, and that's what creates this structure of the braid. Making sure to make it one full intact braid. Now, because we have 6 on the bottom and we have the 2 empty slots on the top there, we need to start with the bottom ones because they need to then fill those empty slots in. So just one at a time, making sure to get the braid as nice and tight as possible here in the middle by working with your fingers and pushing against the braid every time you move a wire, and the wire you're moving is crossing over. So here, I'm using my index finger to push against this wire, is crossing over the wire going out to the side to come down, and the same with here. I'm just using my thumb to do it. Move to the other side and repeat. One wire at a time. Now, as you might be able to tell as well, is as I'm doing this, here where the wires are laying kind of next to each other, they maybe start to overlap a little bit here. Don't worry about that, as long as obviously you keep them in the correct slots. It's just because they have a bit of curve to them, because we're bringing them up and down and we're running our fingers over the wires. So the side one here, remember, we're missing 2 on the bottom to get the original setup. So I bring one side at a time, pull at it slightly, and then push against here as you're bringing it down. It tightens up the braid a little bit as well, and place it into the empty slot. And then repeat on the other side, a little tug, and then push against the braid. And now the wires are back in the original setup again, and that was another full round. So just keep repeating this until you used up all your wires, or until you reach the length that you need. And if you're struggling a bit with this, I do have a video explaining in more detail about basics of wire kumihimo, and I give tips and hints as well. So if you need that, I'm going to put a link to that in the description box down below. Otherwise, keep making this braid here in the same way. So once we're done making the braid on the disc, we can easily take it off and not worry about the braid coming undone, because it's wire here, so it holds its shape. So you can see, just let that open end be, and we then have our braid ready for the next step. So we need to cut a length of a 0.6mm wire here, and this is about 90 centimeters long. So grabbing our braid here, what you'll find is that there is kind of 2 sides to it, so they are slightly different from each other. One side is more flat, and the other one you can kind of feel more texture and seem a bit more curved. Now the flatter side is what I personally feel is the front, and that's what we're going to be adding our embellishment or pattern, you could say, onto. So I have that facing me, so obviously I can kind of see what it is that I'm doing. That's the main focus. So I'm grabbing my 0.6mm length that I cut ready. I'm just starting towards one end, and I'm also starting towards one end of my braid. So I'm just starting on the bottom here, and I'm not going to start right down at the very bottom. I like to kind of just go up a little bit, because also we then have some braid to finish off at the end. So what we need to do is, if you can have a look, you'll find that you kind of have, first of all, because this is wire and not cord, you'll have gaps between the wires, so you can kind of get your wire in several places here in the braid because of that, and that's what we want to take advantage of. So you'll find you have some holes or gaps that go right down the center that we can quite easily get a wire through, and also on the outer edges like that. So those are the ones that we're going to be using. So what I'm going to do is just smooth out my wire a little bit. Towards the end of my 0.6mm, I'm going to find one of my middle gaps and just go from front to back. And I'm just going to leave a short little tail here on the back, and I'm just going to basically bend that down. And that's literally just to kind of help hold on to the wire and the piece. You can kind of twist it around a little bit for now. It's just so it doesn't pull out while we're making the rest. Now what we do is basically the midpoint is kind of the spine. We're going to be going from all the way up along the braid. So I'm coming out in the middle there. Now what I'm going to do is first we're going to swap side to side basically. So I'm going to start doing from the middle here to one side, then go back to the middle and then the other side. Now here I'm going to just have a look. If you can see, you can also follow kind of the path from this midpoint where the wire is coming out. You can see if I follow that path where the wire is going through the braid there multiple times, this specific path where the wire is coming out from is where I want to start, and that's where I want to go through the outer gap again from front to back. Because don't worry about this tail, I'm just, like I said, using that to make sure the wire doesn't pull through the braid. I'm just using it to hold on to. So I'm pulling the wire through here, and you can see it's now getting a little loop, and then as I pull it all the way tight, it's going to make it sit basically on top of that little path from the middle, following that path and then going through the gap on the outside. Now you might find that it kind of sticks up a little bit, but don't worry so much about that. Just pull it until it basically is pulled tight and you can't really pull it anymore. So right now this 0.6mm wire is coming out technically towards the back there, but on the outer edge. So what I'm going to do is, if I can, I prefer to do this still looking from the front. I'm going to grab the very end, and I want to now go through again the middle, but the next one up. So this is the one where we just came through in the middle. I want to then come through here basically, but from back to front. So I'm just going to find that gap if I can with the end of my wire. So here it is. I'm going through from back to front, and make sure it's the gap right above the previous one, and then pull that through. So it's almost a little bit like sewing here, kind of just going through the gaps that already exist. And then as I'm pulling this, you can see on the back it's then going to pull tight and basically just cross from the outer edge in towards, just move that tail a bit in towards the middle. And this is just really to get in position for the next path here on the front. So like I said, we're going to keep swapping from side to side, having the middle of the braid as kind of the starting point every time. And here the gap we're coming through in the middle, and I want to go towards the right side because that's the opposite to what we just did. And again, you just want to follow the right path. So basically go up a gap every time. So I'm going through this gap here because that's the equivalent to the gap above the one we went through on the other side. And then just pull your wire through nice and gently. Make sure you also don't get any kinks or anything as your wire loops here. And then pull it all the way until it sits nice and tight on the front of the braid. And again, you can see it follows that path almost created by the braid structure. And now this length is coming out towards the back. Same principle, we need to go back to the middle, but step up one from the previous. So that means if I can find it from the back, you can obviously turn your piece around and also look at it from the back if you prefer that. It's completely up to you, but just make sure you find the right gap to go through in the middle, and then we can start pulling it through again. Nice and gentle here. And making sure I don't get any kinks that I don't want in the wire. And then just make sure that on the back it's as tight as possible. And it just goes from the outer edge now in towards the middle. So now we have our wire back coming out from the gap in the middle there. I'm going to grab the very end. Now also just a tip what I like to do, because obviously we are working with this 0.6mm length, I like to kind of, once I've pulled it and it's in position, before I then start doing the next step like I'm going to be doing here, I like to just kind of run the length through my hands and fingers. It smooths it out and gets rid of any possible kinks there is or bends, and also just warms it up and makes it easier to work with. But now, because the previous one was towards the right, I'm now going to go back and go towards the left. Now it becomes a bit easier because we already have a previous one. So what I know I need to do is skip the next gap on the outer edge, but go through the one after that. So basically the second one after the previous one, because that's then equivalent to the one that's above the one we just did on the other side. So we're kind of alternating like this from side to side, as you can see. And that then naturally will follow the path in the braid structure. So get this all the way through, nice and gentle, and then pull it tight. So you can see that then sits, and basically it looks like the first one we did, but just further up, and we have the one on the other side in between. Again, run it through my hands and fingers, just smooth anything out, find the next middle gap. You can just come through from the back. Like I said, if you're struggling with that, literally just come through, like flip it and look at where you're putting your wire through if you need to. And that can help sometimes. Pull the wire through. So you can see there, little loop left. Pull it so it just sits across the back. Again, don't worry about these feeling a little bit kind of uncomfortable as well, because if you feel them you might find that that's going to be uncomfortable against the skin. But I'm going to go back over this once we've gone all the way up and kind of flatten things out, so don't worry about that too much. But then just the next one here from the middle. Obviously the previous one we did was to the left, so now we need to go to the right. And again, because we already have one there, it's easy to just know that we got to skip one gap and go through the second gap. And then just pull it through. Until, I think that would create a kink, so just make sure to undo that before pulling it completely tight, and you can then see the effect that we're going to end up getting. So kind of crossing, alternating from side to side, and it kind of looks like it's incorporated into the braid once we've done it, but we're actually making the braid first and then just adding this afterwards. And of course using contrasting colors just makes it stand out more. Or if you're using the same wire and oxidizing it, that would make a really cool pattern as well. So you just want to keep going like this all the way up until you have the length that you need. So I now made it all the way to the other end, and you can see this is the effect that we get. So all that's left to do now is finish off our wires and our braid. So I'm just going to finish off the excess of the embellishment wire here, in my case the silver one. So just starting with this one. It's coming out at the back but towards one of the sides where I finished last. So what I'm going to do is basically we just kind of need to tuck it away. And we don't need to worry too much about it because we're going to add the ribbon ends that's going to cover the end of the braid anyway. So I'm going to get my flush cutters, and then I just want to cut off the excess, but make sure to leave just a short little tail of wire. So something like that, you can see that sticking out. Then I'm going to get my chain nose or flat nose, and I basically just want to squeeze that in so it kind of curves around the side and is almost kind of part of the braid, just so it's not sticking out anywhere. So that's one end, and the other end my wire is coming out in the middle of the braid, so right there. So here what I'm gonna do is also cut off the excess, and again literally just leave a short little tail like that. And just got a little bit of wire sticking out there. Again, I'm just gonna take my chain nose and basically flatten that down to one of the sides, just again so the end isn't sticking straight out. So there we go, and I've finished off those wires, and all we got to do now is actually finish off the ends of the braid itself. And for this I'm going to grab my heavy duty flush cutters, because obviously we have a lot of wires in this braid, and I'm literally just going to cut off the end of the braid where my embellishment ends. So I've just made the embellishment the length that I need, and then I just want to start cutting from one side here. Just do a bit at a time and cut straight across to the other side. So just like that. And we have a straight end. Of course, just the other end. And do the same thing, just where that embellishment ends, you want to cut straight across as well. And then after we cut off the excess of the braid, what we need to do is get ribbon ends to finish off the ends there. And obviously so we have these loops as well, so we can actually attach our findings. And to do that, I'm also then going to be using my E6000 glue to help make it extra strong. So I'm just going to do one at a time. I'm going to get a little bit of glue out here. I just like using a toothpick to help apply it. Just get rid of that. So just get a little bit. We don't need too much glue because we're going to clamp the ribbon ends down, so it's just going to come spilling out anyway if we do too much. But just a bit here. We can always add a bit more. So start with something like that. And then I'm going to add it inside of the ribbon end first of all. Just make sure to cover the inside walls there. And like I said, we don't need to fill this up with glue all the way inside because the braid is going to go in there. So obviously that's going to take up some space, but just enough to cover the sides. And then I also like to take the excess that's on my toothpick and just put it on the end of the braid and just try and get it in between the wires there, really into the nooks and crannies. So like that. When we then add the ribbon end onto it, when the glue then dries, it's going to really adhere nicely together because we have glue on both pieces, and it's also really nestled in between the wires. It's going to really make it nice and secure. Then grab my flat nose pliers, and I like to put my fingers on either side to kind of hold it in place because it can slip while you're clamping it down. So I just like to do it a little at a time before it's almost all the way down, and then I just remove my fingers. As you can see, it likes to kind of slip around a bit, but then make sure it's in the middle, sitting properly, and then you want to do your final squeezes, which nice and firm squeeze on the ribbon end. And I also like to just come in from the sides to kind of close them up a little bit. And then now it's attached. So first of all, you can see it doesn't slip around as much. It will maybe still move a bit, but that's where the glue comes in. Because once that glue then dries, it's going to really stay on nice and strong. And of course, do the same with the other end as well. So I now finished off both ends, and I've also attached my findings, so my clasp, my extender chain. And then this is the front of the bracelet, and this is the back. So all that's left to do now is shape it, which is also what we need to take into account was the front and the back, because we want the front to obviously face outward. So I'm just going to start shaping this with my hands and fingers. You can also shape it around something that has the size and shape you want it to have. So a bracelet mandrel or something like that, anything you have handy, but you can also just use your hands and fingers. So you just want to go in and start adding a curve into it. And like I said, make sure the front here is going to be outward of the piece and the back is going to be inwards and towards your wrist. So I don't want to go into one place and just do a big bend, because that'll kind of more put it out of shape. So I'm just going to go in and start putting a curve into it. And I'm basically going from side to side here. And then back the other way, adding a curve gradually. As you can see, so basically the aim is to get the two ends closer together so we can always use the clasp. And personally, I like to make it more of an oval shape. I find that that sits better on the wrist. But just keep going like this. So once you're done shaping it, you can use a clasp and your bracelet is ready to wear. So I definitely think this design is unisex, and you would also achieve a very interesting effect by oxidizing it, as that would really make the pattern stand out. But otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Now, if you like wire kumihimo in general, I do actually have loads of other tutorials on my channel, and I also have a book just dedicated to wire kumihimo as well. So if you haven't seen that already, I'm going to leave a link to it in the description box down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.